Nightfall on April 7, 1944. A shattered radio intercept crackles through static. Fragments of German voices, panicked and confused. Somewhere in the French countryside, more than 1,000 Luftwaffe aircraft lie vulnerable, parked shoulder to shoulder. The photograph taken hours before shows rows of Messerschmitt, Bf 109, and Focke-Wulf FOW 190. Their canopies reflecting moonlight like cold eyes. Yet, the image conceals something more. A faint discoloration on the tarmac, barely noticeable, hinting at a breach in airfield security. How could such a concentration of aircraft be left so exposed? Why did the High Command fail to detect the impending storm? This was not just a strike. It was the silent unraveling of air supremacy. The origins of this devastating blow trace back to a calculated gamble by the United States Army Air Forces. By early 1944, American strategists identified the Luftwaffe's fuel and aircraft reserves as Achilles' heels. A secret memorandum from a senior operations planner reveals an audacious plan to cripple the Luftwaffe's operational capacity overnight, preventing any effective response to the impending Normandy invasion. Intelligence sources, intercepted communications, aerial reconnaissance photos painted a grim picture of logistical bottlenecks and overstretched defenses. A weathered blueprint of the targeted airfields, annotated with strike coordinates, sits in the archives, its margins filled with cryptic notes about timing and bomb load. What was the true scale of intelligence penetration into German defenses? Were there leaks or misjudgments that sealed the Luftwaffe's fate? At the heart of the disaster was the Luftwaffe's own design philosophy. Their aircraft, boasting impressive speed and firepower, Bf 109s equipped with 20mm cannons, FW-19s with heavy machine guns, were formidable in dogfights, but vulnerable on the ground. Compounded by shortages of high-octane fuel and spare parts, the Luftwaffe's readiness was fragile. Airfield dispersal was limited. Many planes were clustered tightly due to a lack of secure hangars. Technical reports from ground crews describe how even minor bomb blasts caused chain reactions, fuel tanks rupturing, munitions detonating. Why had the Luftwaffe not adapted its infrastructure to mitigate these risks? Was there a fatal overconfidence in the supposed invulnerability of their air bases? The first trial of the strategy came in the early hours of April 7th, when hundreds of American bombers descended upon German airfields in northern France. The 8th Air Force's precision bombing, supported by escort fighters, shattered runways and destroyed aircraft in unprecedented numbers. Squadron commanders' after-action reports record stunned disbelief. Entire squadrons wiped out while still on the ground, caught in a deadly trap. Radar operators detected the incoming raid late, hampered by jamming and confusion. Yet, the expected Luftwaffe scramble never materialized. Their planes lay wrecked, their crews overwhelmed. How was such a comprehensive failure of early warning possible? Did internal sabotage or intelligence failures play a role? The Luftwaffe's response was desperate, yet revealing. Orders were issued to disperse aircraft, camouflage airfields, and deploy anti-aircraft batteries more aggressively. Fighter units were instructed to maintain continuous patrols, despite dwindling fuel reserves. Technical manuals were hastily revised to reinforce ground crew. Protocols against incendiary attacks. Yet these measures came too late. Memoirs from Luftwaffe pilots describe a growing sense of futility as aircraft numbers dwindled and morale plummeted. What internal fractures, political, logistical, or strategic, undermined these countermeasures? Was the Luftwaffe leadership blinded by ideology or complacency? The turning point came within weeks. The map of German airfields showed a shrinking network of operational bases. Protocols for aircraft repair and replacement bogged down under Allied pressure. Fuel shortages became critical, grounding even the surviving fighters. The clandestine American campaign, combining intelligence breakthroughs and relentless bombing, had fractured the Luftwaffe's backbone. Declassified documents reveal frantic communications between German high command and field units, desperate pleas for reinforcements and equipment. Yet, the tide had irrevocably turned. What hidden alliances, betrayals, or blind spots sealed the Luftwaffe's doom on that fateful night? Each episode is a document I pull from the dust of the archives. Share your own stories. Many of you have relatives who lived through that time, and your words help connect personal memory with archival evidence. Stay curious. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode tomorrow. The aftermath was a landscape of smoldering wreckage and shattered dreams. Reconnaissance photos from dawn reveal twisted metal carcasses where sleek fighters once stood ready to claw the skies. The acrid smell of burnt fuel and scorched earth still lingered, captured in eyewitness accounts from nearby villagers. German engineers and mechanics scrambled amidst the ruins, their faces etched with disbelief and exhaustion. A single report from a ground crew chief mentions a dozen fuel trucks destroyed in one hit, sparking secondary explosions that ignited entire rows of aircraft. Yet, beneath the visible devastation lay a deeper wound, the psychological blow to the Luftwaffe's elite. How could an air force, once feared across Europe, be so utterly paralyzed overnight? Was this the collapse of morale that no bulletin could quantify? Behind the scenes, intelligence officers pieced together fragments of a larger puzzle. American cryptographers had intercepted encrypted Luftwaffe communications, hinting at internal discord, disagreements between field commanders, and the Reich's centralized command on resource allocation. A torn fragment of a decrypted message suggests sabotage fears were circulating within German ranks, though no formal investigation ensued. Meanwhile, the Americans exploited these rifts, increasing the precision of subsequent raids. A blurred photograph of a Luftwaffe operations room shows maps riddled with red target markers and frantic annotations. What secrets were buried in these intercepted messages? Could internal betrayal have hastened the Air Force's undoing, or was it merely the result of overwhelming external force? Fuel scarcity emerged as the silent killer. Detailed logistical records unearthed later reveal that by early 1944, the Luftwaffe's fuel reserves had plummeted to critical lows. Production lines struggled under Allied bombing campaigns, and the synthetic fuel plants, Germany's lifeline, were themselves targets of sabotage and air raids. Pilots recount flights cut short, forced landings, and empty tanks during combat. The inability to refuel aircraft after the April assault turned a tactical victory into a strategic collapse. A faded schematic of a synthetic fuel refinery, marked with bomb damage assessments, underscores this vulnerability. How did the Luftwaffe's dependence on synthetic fuel shape its fate? Was the failure to protect these facilities a fatal strategic oversight? The American night raid was not an isolated event, but part of a sustained effort known as Operation Point Blank. Declassified mission logs reveal a coordinated assault strategy combining B-17 flying fortresses, P-51 Mustangs, and radar jamming technology. The mission planners exploited the Luftwaffe's predictable response patterns, timing the bombers' approach to arrive under the cover of darkness and bad weather. An audio recording from a U.S. bomber crew captures the tense silence before the strike, punctuated only by the distant thud of bombs detonating. This operation was a calculated orchestration of technology and intelligence. How did the Luftwaffe fail to anticipate such a multifaceted attack? Were their radar networks compromised, or was complacency the deadliest flaw? In the wake of destruction, the Luftwaffe attempted to regroup by relocating aircraft to secondary fields and improvised airstrips. However, photographic reconnaissance shows these sites lacked adequate infrastructure. No hardened shelters, scant anti-aircraft defenses, and minimal fuel storage. Pilots described these makeshift bases as death traps, vulnerable to even minor raids. German command issued desperate orders for night flying and fragmented sorties, but coordination faltered amid mounting losses. A blurred snapshot taken from a reconnaissance plane shows scattered aircraft huddled in open fields under patchy camouflage nets. Why did the Luftwaffe underestimate the importance of dispersed operations? Was the failure to adapt a symptom of deeper strategic paralysis? Meanwhile, the Allies tightened their grip, using the shattered Luftwaffe as a springboard for the upcoming Normandy invasion. Intelligence reports indicated that the German air defense was no longer capable of mounting an effective counterattack. The map of European air superiority shifted dramatically, with Allied forces gaining uncontested control of the skies. German High Command's frantic attempts to rebuild the Luftwaffe yielded diminishing returns, hampered by resource shortages and constant air raids. A classified directive from the Luftwaffe leadership, dated weeks after the raid, orders the redistribution of remaining aircraft to critical sectors, acknowledging the untenable position of their air power. How much longer could the Luftwaffe hold on? Was this night the point of no return in the air war over Europe? By mid-1944, the Luftwaffe's once formidable fighter wings had been reduced to fragmented remnants. Field reports from surviving squadron commanders describe a desperate scramble to patch together operational units from the wreckage. Pilots were sent into combat with minimal training on unfamiliar aircraft, while maintenance crews faced chronic shortages of parts and fuel. The iconic Bf-10-9s and FW-190s were increasingly cannibalized to keep a handful of planes airborne. A faded, hand-drawn chart from a Luftwaffe logistics officer lists aircraft losses and repair rates, revealing a widening gap that no amount of improvisation could close. How did the Luftwaffe's industrial base fail to meet the demands of sustained combat? Were internal production conflicts or Allied sabotage to blame? The psychological toll on German airmen was profound. Letters from pilots to their families, preserved in private collections, speak of exhaustion, fear, and an eroding belief in victory. One letter, dated June 1944, describes the haunting silence of airfields where comrades once prepared for battle, now littered with wreckage and ghosts. The camaraderie of the Luftwaffe began to fray as losses mounted and missions became increasingly perilous. A grainy photograph shows a group of pilots gathered around a makeshift memorial, faces shadowed, eyes hollow. What effect did this spiritual collapse have on operational effectiveness? Was the loss of morale as deadly as the bombers overhead? Meanwhile, Allied intelligence continued to exploit the Luftwaffe's vulnerability. Signals intercepts revealed frantic attempts by German commanders to conceal the extent of their losses from the Reich leadership. A cracked cipher machine's output outlines emergency requests for reinforcements and replacements, met with bureaucratic delays and dwindling resources. The increasing gap between frontline realities and official reports created confusion at the highest levels. A torn fragment of a command directive orders the preservation of illusionary strength to maintain civilian morale. How long could such deception mask the truth? Did this disconnect accelerate the Luftwaffe's decline? The strategic implications rippled beyond air combat alone. With Luftwaffe airfields devastated, German ground forces lost vital air cover and reconnaissance capabilities. Intelligence assessments from the Allied side note the increased freedom of movement for armored divisions during the Normandy landings. A series of aerial maps show shrinking zones of Luftwaffe control, replaced by sweeping Allied patrols. German commanders on the ground reported feeling abandoned as air support dwindled. Was the destruction of the Luftwaffe the decisive factor enabling the Allied breakout from Fort Normandy, or merely one element in a broader collapse? As Allied bombing intensified, the Luftwaffe's attempts at technological innovation faltered. Experimental jet fighters and rocket-powered interceptors were rushed into service, but their impact was limited. Engineering reports describe production bottlenecks, pilot shortages, and reliability issues. A blurry photograph of a Mi-262 jet, its engines cold and idle on a bombed airfield, symbolizes the gap between innovation and operational reality. How much did these late-war technological efforts influence the outcome? Were they too little? Too late? The final months saw the Luftwaffe reduced to a shadow of its former self. Operational directives emphasized defensive tactics, prioritizing the protection of key industrial regions over offensive sorties. Pilots describe chaotic retreats and near-constant engagements with superior Allied forces. Official records show catastrophic attrition rates, with entire squadrons wiped out in single engagements. A map from late 1944 illustrates the shrinking perimeter of German air control, now confined largely to the Eastern Front. Could the Luftwaffe have survived had the April 1944 bombing not shattered its core? Or was the collapse inevitable given the strategic pressures? As winter set in, the Luftwaffe's capacity to mount coordinated defense crumbled entirely. Field communications intercepted by Allied intelligence reveal frantic orders to consolidate remaining aircraft at a handful of fortified bases deep within Germany. These locations, marked by hastily constructed concrete bunkers and anti-aircraft emplacements, were intended to serve as last bastions against the relentless Allied air onslaught. A stark photograph from a reconnaissance plane shows these bases shrouded in heavy smoke, the silhouettes of damaged aircraft barely visible through the haze. Yet, even these strongholds were vulnerable. How did the Luftwaffe expect to turn the tide with resources so depleted and bases constantly under siege? Was there a final, desperate plan lurking beneath the surface? The human cost of this collapse became increasingly apparent. Casualty lists from December 1944 show an unprecedented number of pilots killed, captured, or missing in action. Training programs were accelerated, often cutting pilot preparation from months to mere weeks. Memoirs from surviving instructors recount the grim reality. Untrained youths thrust into the cockpit, facing seasoned, Allied pilots with overwhelming numbers. A faded photograph captures a group of these young aviators, their faces a mixture of fear and resolve, under the dim light of a hastily built barracks. Could these raw recruits compensate for the loss of experienced airmen? Was this a sign of the Luftwaffe's desperation or a final act of defiance? Strategic planning documents recovered from the German High Command reveal internal debates over the Luftwaffe's future role. Some advocated shifting focus entirely to defensive operations, using remaining fighters primarily for interception and homeland defense. Others pushed for risky, concentrated strikes to disrupt Allied supply lines. A crumpled map marked with proposed target zones and flight paths suggests plans for last-ditch efforts that never materialized. The discord reflected not only military challenges, but ideological fractures within the leadership. How did these internal conflicts affect operational decisions? Was the Luftwaffe's fragmentation a cause or consequence of its downfall? Allied forces capitalized on this fragmentation, executing relentless bombing campaigns that further eroded German air capabilities. Intelligence reports detail the use of improved radar-guided bombers and night-fighting tactics that overwhelmed Luftwaffe defenses. An intercepted communication from a Luftwaffe night fighter pilot speaks of endless skies filled with ghosts, a haunting metaphor for the relentless Allied attacks. Photographs show bomb craters pockmarking runways and shattered hangars, evidence of the systematic dismantling of German air infrastructure. How did technological advancements tip the scales irrevocably? Was it simply a matter of overwhelming force, or did superior innovation seal the Luftwaffe's fate? In the final months before the war's end, the Luftwaffe existed more in name than in power. Pilots faced near impossible odds, flying outnumbered and outgunned. Official war diaries note the dwindling. Sorties, often mere token gestures against the advancing Allies. A grainy image of a lone fighter silhouetted against a burning horizon captures the tragic end of an era. The destruction wrought in that single night of April 1944 had triggered a cascade, one that the Luftwaffe could neither halt nor reverse. Was the annihilation of those 1,000 planes the death knell of German air power, or merely the moment when a larger collapse became inevitable? In the final reckoning, the destruction of over 1,000 Luftwaffe aircraft in a single night was more than a tactical disaster. It was the shattering of an illusion. The concentrated bombing campaign not only decimated materiel, but exposed systemic weaknesses, flawed logistics, inflexible command structures, and a failure to adapt to evolving warfare. The loss crippled Germany's ability to contest the skies, allowing the Allies uncontested aerial dominance that proved decisive in subsequent ground operations. Behind the ruins, the Luftwaffe's remaining pilots and crews faced a grim reality. They were fighting a lost war in the air. The night of April 7, 1944, stands as a silent testament to how overwhelming force, precise intelligence, and unrelenting strategy can bring even the mightiest war machine to its knees. What remains hidden in those charred airfields is a story not just of planes destroyed, but of an empire unraveling from within, where every broken wing echoed a fracture in the Third Reich's fading power.